Welcome to the Blue Watch, your backstage pass to the lives of frontline officers and the leadership steering the way. I'm Chris Casto. A special guest today from Montreal, Canada, a former paramedic, Daniel Garvin, whose personal journey has led him to become an advocate for mental health for first responders. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, believe me. Very, very happy to be here.
You're helping lead the charge for more access to mental health resources for first responders. Tell me a little bit about your background as a medic and how that has led you to where you're doing today.
I guess I would start my background as being in the military. I started off as a peacekeeper in the mid 70s. I started in 1974. I went over to Germany for training to be a peacekeeper, and then I was sent to Syria, and then from Syria to Israel, and then from Israel to Cyprus. And back in those days, peacekeeping with the UN, as far as Canadian peacekeepers go, we had weapons, but we had no rounds. So there was no way we could actually defend ourselves because we were there as peacekeepers, if you will. Yeah, it sounds backwards, but
I'm trying
that,
here. So it's like, so you have a
yeah,
weapon, but you can't have ammo. So that's like having a stick.
correct,
I mean,
correct. I think
oh,
the stick would have been even a better defense system. But in
probably.
any case, things have changed greatly since then, thank God. But I think that really set the stage for my PTSD because when I came back to Canada in 19, when did I come back here? 1980, around 1983, I came back to Canada from Europe and I became a medic in 1984. And then by 2017, I was done. So my background was in EMS. We were frontline paramedics here. So you deal with everything from A to Z, and the intervention, as far as the mental health side of things go, was pretty much non-existent. It was suck it up, buttercup, and move on. It's part of the job. I mean, you know that drill.
Oh, absolutely. That's still kind of a lot that happens even here in the US with policing. It's you kind of have that
It's
stigma and
very
it's like, nah,
unfortunate.
just work through it.
Yeah, yeah, precisely. So that's what led up to my breakdown, I guess. I had two back-to-back very difficult calls involving pediatrics with traumatic death involved, and I think that's what did it. I mean, from that point on, I was useless. So I was done, and I knew I was done. So I didn't have any qualms about being taken off the road. I fully agreed. I didn't even know how I would respond in a certain situation. So I guess I could see myself as a potential danger to my partners, my patients, other interventionists. So I was totally, agreeing with being taken off the road. And then from there, I didn't really know where I was going. I was given a desk job, which lasted for about 2.5, 3 years, I suppose. And then after that, I was told there was nothing left for me. So good luck, find another job. At that
Yeah.
at that point, you've done that. I had done that for 33 years. I was nearing retirement, and I thought, who's going to take me? I'm a burned out old man, and all I know is EMS. So who's going to take me? So it just led to it led to the spiraling to make it even faster.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of like we as, first responders were told, hey, go out here and take care of all these situations that are beyond the handling of others. But then we're supposed to handle them and then we're supposed to, not have it affect us. But obviously,
Exactly.
each call affects us.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when I was first diagnosed with PTSD, I was allowed to have 8 sessions with a therapist to see if that would do any good. Unfortunately, no bad on her, but she didn't understand PTSD, so she didn't know how to deal with what I was bringing up. So it was a complete waste of time for those 8 sessions. And when my superiors asked me how it went, I told them I'm worse than I was before.
Mm.
So I was given a second set of 8 sessions. And with that therapist, on the third session around, I was talking about my reoccurring nightmares and the trouble I was having sleeping. And she burst out weeping in the middle of the session because she couldn't deal with what I was telling her.
Wow.
So at the end of that session, when I left to go home, I had made my decision that suicide was the only way for me to deal with what I was dealing with.
Wow. What helped you? What kind of pulled you back from the ledge, so to speak, of,
Well,
to where you are now?
unbeknownst to me, there was one of my colleagues who was he was pretty hip to what was going on with me, and he was keeping a close eye on me. So when I attempted to take my own life, he intervened. And so if it hadn't have been for him, I wouldn't be sitting here. And I also think that my faith, I have a very deep and profound faith, and I think that was a real stronghold for me to claw my way back. Because I think if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be here, to quite honest.
Yeah. In talking about clawing your way back, now you're not only for yourself, but also for other first responders in the field. Tell me a little bit about some of the things that you're working with and trying to help get more access for mental health resources for first responders.
It's a good question. When I first came up with this idea of helping others, I didn't know anything about resources or how I would go about setting something up or even contacting people who would be interested in taking part. So I just did a grassroots kind of a thing and started reaching out to people that I knew that were both, I mean, in law enforcement, people that I knew in firefighting, correctional officers, anybody that I knew who worked in first response or at the front line that were friends of mine through the years. And I was asking them about, what was the intervention for them? What kind of help did they get? And a lot of them were coming back with pretty much carbon copy of what I myself had already gone through. So I contacted another friend who owns quite a large building, and it's empty. So I asked him if we could use that space to have very informal meetings, and I started just inviting people that I knew who might be interested. And it started off as almost, this sounds funny, but it almost started off like an AA meeting where there was coffee and donuts and people were just yakking about this and that. And then slowly we'd come around to talking about PTSD, stress on the job. We're not getting enough intervention, and we would have general conversations. But from that, I started to realize that a firefighter with another firefighter was very, very closed. They wouldn't open up because they were afraid of being judged. And I noticed the same thing with law enforcement, with paramedics. So I kind of tried this new thing where I put, say, a police officer with a paramedic, and they would go off, the two of them, and just have a chat. And I found that doing that, they were a lot more apt to open up to each other because the fear of being judged or seen as weak in their particular job was not there. And so they were more apt to open up and bring up a lot more than they would with, say, a colleague. And that was working really well. And then we would go back to general discussion. And for some strange reason, people felt more apt to open up now in a group setting. And so then I contacted a few friends that were in psychotherapy, and I started asking, are there any therapists out there that would have a sliding scale as far as charging? Because it's an expensive thing. We all know that. And the budget's just not there. So yeah, we did find a few therapists that would offer us a sliding scale for treatment, even to the point where some of the sessions were absolutely even free. And we started sending the people that were keen on getting interventions, we'd send them to the therapists. And I got to tell you that I think up till now, I think I've had 3 or 4 people that have come to me and told me that they were seriously considering suicide. And through this type of intervention, they've decided to go through therapy and they've changed their minds. So it's working. So I'm going full blast now. I'm putting the metal to the pedal to the metal, and I'm not stopping. This is working. So even though it's grassroots, we still don't have any actual budget. The money comes from donations and the people themselves, but it's working. It's working because there's no red tape and there's no parameters and there's no this or that. Everything's wide open and we can be free and honest with each other. I think that makes a big difference.
And is this something that you're doing specifically in like the Montreal area, or is this something that
Yes.
you're trying to expand? Where are you at with it, and what's it called?
It's called Recognize, Respond, and Recover. It's something that I've started, yes, very, very much grassroots, very, very local to get started. There's always that possibility of expanding. Oddly enough, through this, I reconnected with some old friends in the forces, and I was told that they had a program for soldiers that were coming back from serving once they were finished their tour, and they could go to these places to seek mental health, mental intervention, I should say, for mental health. And it kind of invited me to a couple of sessions where I thought this was really helpful. And now we're working on possibly merging with the forces to bring in police officers, paramedics, firefighters, correctional officers, and what have you, to benefit from this service. We still have to get through the hoops of getting the government to accept this, but I think the door is starting to open.
Of course, like you said, the red tape and everything that you have to go through. I really love the idea though that you bring in like police officers, fire, medics all together to talk because you're absolutely right. There is a stigma, the bravado that we have that we don't really want to look like we can't handle these things. But the truth is that we have these cumulative stressors and these micro traumas all throughout our career that we go to. You were talking about how you had multiple calls in a row that kind of led to you having issues. I can personally remember going to a deceased infant call where it was right after my own son was born, and because of that, it hit me hard, and I had to ask my sergeant, "Hey, I need to be pulled off this call." And I was told, kind of like where you're at, to suck it up, Buttercup. I was told, "Hey, we don't have enough people, so you're going to have to handle this, deal with it." And it's those things do mess you up over time.
They do, and lots of times, and this has been something that's come up over and over again. It's not necessarily always something that we see, so it's not always a visual aspect. But some people have mentioned just the smell of a perfume reminded them, let's say, of their grandmother or their mother, or something that someone said reminded them of their dad or their brother or their sister who had passed away tragically. So there's that correlation, that relation sometimes just through sight, through smell, through different things that we deal with. So yeah, our job on the front line is a very difficult job. It might seem it is glorious to a degree, I suppose, but I mean, we're the ones that are willing to get up every day and go and stand in between sanity and total insanity, if you will. Like, we visit the underbelly of society on a regular basis. We're going to be affected. There's no question.
Hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely, no
And
question
we're all in
about
the same boat, right? We're all in
it.
the same boat. I mean, firefighters, police officers, paramedics, correctional officers, we all deal with a very negative aspect of society on a regular basis. So it doesn't matter which uniform we're wearing, we're all visiting the same place. And so we are all going to be affected in some way, shape, or form. So we all need help.
Yeah, I've told the folks that I work with regularly, it's like we're the people that you call when you don't know what to do. And it gets to the point of like when normal society can't handle what's happening, that's when we get called in. And
Absolutely.
we always roll together. It's like if it's a medical call, it's police or EMS and fire. If there might be some sort of legal aspect of it, they always bring us along too. It's like we're always, hand in hand working on these. So we all see the same stuff, or, even like you say, smell the same stuff, feel the same stuff that we have to go through those other senses. So it's true that we see these traumas on a daily basis, but then we're expected to kind of like what you said, to suck it up. So it's kind of like, okay, well, when do we get to be human?
Hmm.
You
That's a
know?
good question. My honest belief is if we have immediate intervention, as soon as a trauma happens, I understand, like you were saying, your sergeant was reluctant to pull you off the intervention. I get that. You're already there. The process has already started. But instead of saying like suck it up or putting it that way, it's more or less if you can get through this, we'll deal with it immediately following this intervention. Not next week, not next month, immediately following. So as soon as everything has been done that you have to do, you should be pulled out of that situation and seen by someone who is certified to deal with the things that you're going through. And then there should be a follow up with you, a follow up with your family, a follow up with people that are close to you because they're going to be affected as well. And I think if we were to, if you will, cut off the head of the snake at the beginning, we don't have to deal with the rest of the snake. We can attack the problem as it presents itself instead of waiting. Because when we wait, frustration builds up and anger and everything else gets in there. And it just becomes a much bigger problem than it was to begin with.
In my department, what we've started doing, we've been doing for a little while now, is critical incident debriefs. So if there's a shift, a unit that is involved in some sort of critical incident, whatever, shooting, stabbing, whatever happens, injured officer, car crash, we have a time where we all meet together, we gather together, and we try to process that with each other. And there's a couple of different techniques you can use to do that. EMDR has a group treatment that happens for traumatic events that you can use, or it could be just talking with our victims counselors. It just makes it a lot easier to kind of communicate, but it does hit that stone wall, kind of like what you were talking about earlier about you don't want to talk about it in front of other cops. It kind of has that, stigma there. So we still run into barriers even when we try to make things right.
We have to have alternatives. I mean, like you just said, we're not all cut from the same cloth. Even in a group session, like you were saying, you have a debrief that's really, really good. I commend your service for having that. But at the same time, in a debrief, you might have let's say you have 8 officers in the debrief that were involved in this certain incident, and 6 of them are willing to talk about this, but there's two that are kind of like holding back.
Mhm.
Nobody goes to them and says, "Hey, you haven't said anything. Like, what do you think?" And a lot of times it's because, let's say, 2 out of the 8 are able to deal with it on their own, or on the other hand, are not able to deal with it, but are not willing to share. And these are the people that we need to follow up with. The ones that are not forthcoming, which I get, we're not going to force anybody, but we've really got to keep an eye on these people because they
Mhm.
seemingly, they seemingly give us the impression that I don't need intervention. I'm okay. I can deal with this, which is fantastic. That's wonderful, but at the same time, not always true. And
Mhm.
these are the people that will go off and do something horrific.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
it's the follow up. I think the follow up is the most important thing of all.
In your scenario, what you went through, you've said, yeah, I'm at a point where I really couldn't be out here right now. You understood why you were being pulled from duty, but there are situations where people are either officers, medics, what have you. The first responders feel like, no, no, I'm good. I'm good. Like you said, those ones that, yeah, I just don't want to talk. The ones that we got to keep an eye out for. But this is a delicate situation because you
Very.
you're sitting here dealing with, the safety of the community as a whole versus the safety of this officer or medic as an individual. And it's how do we handle these situations delicately with compassion?
I mean, most of us work in pairs. Most of us have a partner, whether it's a regular partner or if it's a rotating partner, but most of us do work with a partner. So that aspect right there, the partner should be the one who is made very aware to watch out for key things, changes in demeanor, anger, outbursts, like anything like that. And then if the person themselves still refuses, then they would be pulled from the job by the person in the service who is responsible for the well-being of its members. So at the very end, what we're basically going to have to do, because we don't have a choice here, is that we're going to have to force some people who are not keen on doing this to actually go through some type of intervention, uh, and explain to them at the same time that this is for their good, not to penalize them, but it's for their good. I liken it to, I'm a medic for a hockey team, and if I think a kid has suffered a concussion, I've got to pull the kid from the game, even if it's just a suspected concussion. And the child then has to be seen by a physician before they're allowed to resume normal activities. A lot of the parents tell me that I'm penalizing their children. I had to explain to them it's not penalizing, it's protecting. It might seem as though the person is being penalized or the person is being chosen for whatever reason, but the whole idea is that it's a village that takes care of a child and not just one family. So if the entire village is watching out for that child, chances are that child's going to be brought up properly.
And unfortunately, the fact is that sometimes people just don't want help. You know, the whole you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink thing.
Yes,
Some people don't want help, and you can try every little bit you can, but there may come a time where you have to just say, you know what, for the sake of our community, for the sake of our the rest of the tribe, so to speak, that we have to say, I'm sorry, you cannot be an officer, a medic, a firefighter at this time.
I totally agree. And I think that's where I was at. And like you said, I realized it. I mean, I was doing the job for the betterment of society, not for the betterment of Dan. And so when it was put to me in that way, I said, yes, you're right, because I wasn't 100% focused when I was doing things. I would respond in ways that were not normal for me. And then when I get up in the morning and ask myself in the mirror, am I the same guy as in the mirror yesterday? I had to say no. So I think when those glaring things start happening, I realized, and I said, "Yeah, you're right. You got to pull me out because I can't deal with this anymore."
It's great that you recognize that in yourself because that's also a statement that you can now take with you in these groups, in these conversations, and be like, hey, I've been there. I've had to sit here and take that hard look in the mirror, and you've recognized that, and that's an amazing aspect, I think.
It's
Now,
interesting that you say it that way too, because many times during the group discussion, I'll bring up things about myself instead of trying to pull something from someone else. And at the end of the session, one person might approach you and say, "Hey, I went through something similar and I never realized how much it's affected me until I heard you talking about it." And everything came rushing back. So sometimes I think just sharing our own fears or our own angers or whatever the case may be, sometimes triggers it in someone else. And they realize that this is what's been bothering them, although they couldn't put their finger on it before.
no, absolutely. I had an officer who was on a call where it was so traumatic that it was a child got a hold of a gun that mom left out and accidentally shot their brother. And in the end, the child survived and everything, but the officer I could tell was just so traumatized in that moment that I actually pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, I need you to just like talk to me for a minute." And then in the end, we decided he can go home for the rest of the night and just like take some time to himself. And I checked in with him the next day. It was the best thing for him in that moment. And it was because I had that crap experience with a sergeant prior, that I was in the mental ability to think about, okay, what do they need in this type of call? So, like you said, using your past experiences to help others open up to that need it's vital.
Absolutely. You bring up a very good point in that you intervened in a situation that you had already similarly gone through. That's tantamount to helping someone who's in that situation. I mean, if you take someone who's gone through a traumatic event and sit them down with somebody who has no idea what that traumatic event is like, there's no way they're going to be able to help them. When you can sympathize and add to what they're saying, they fully understand that you have visited that place, and so it's easier for them to be open with you and to share with you what they are going through in their own journey. So the people that intervene have to be people that not necessarily have reached a point of burnout or post-traumatic stress, but people that have experience, people that have been there and done that, and they can share ways that they have been able to get through.
Mhm.
And perhaps that's going to be good for someone else.
It pours over into our lives off the clock. We have, like, for policing, it's high rates of alcoholism, divorce, which is rampant for officers. We're pretty much on par with the U.S. military when it comes to that. Is it the same within like the paramedic community as well?
Unfortunately, yeah, we see a very high rate of divorce, a very high rate of conjugal violence.
Mhm.
Suicide is off the charts. Very, very unfortunate. But again, I believe it's because even now, but I'm just saying up until now, the intervention has not been there.
Hmm.
It's kind of like, okay, we're going to give you a week off, and you should be able to, should be okay after that. It takes a lot more than a week off or a day off or a weekend. It takes constant um, backing. It takes therapy. We nobody likes to admit they've gone through therapy. But we all kind of feel like, I guess I'm a little weak and upstairs if I've had to go through therapy. But if you look at it like, if I fall down and break my arm, I've got to go to the hospital and have a cast put on my arm, and it's going to take time to heal. It's a process. So if something in my brain is not functioning properly, I need to see the proper person who can intervene and fix that, and it's going to take time for that to heal. That we have to put it on an even keel so that people see it for what it is, rather than saying, "Oh, this guy's half crooked." That's been the problem up until now. I mean, look what they used to say to soldiers when they came back from World War II, that they had battle fatigue or all this kind of thing. Like, it wasn't battle fatigue. These guys were dealing with PTSD. And
Hmm.
all the guys that came back from the guys that came back from Vietnam were just sort of told, like, yeah, well, whatever, man, go back into society. Man, when you've gone through such traumatic events, you can't just turn it on and turn it off. So I think, emergency services needs to put a lot more money into supporting who we are and what we do,
Hmm.
so that we can deal with this. And if we need intervention and we need time away, and well, then that's what we get, so that
Hmm.
we can possibly come back and resume. The idea is we've got to change the mindset of everyone involved, that mental illness is an acceptable illness. It's not something that makes us different or makes us weak, or it's an acceptable illness, just like a broken leg or a broken arm. And I think we have a lot of work to do as far as that goes, because even society in general, they don't fully understand yet what post-traumatic stress is, or anything of that matter, even depression for that matter. They don't understand the full impact of what depression is.
I'll take yours as a case example, right? Take what you went through. You worked for so many years, you encountered all these traumatic events, and now you're having to be pulled off the job, right? Well, like in when it comes to the US, like you said, talking about it as a broken arm, if I get injured at work, I have workers' comp, right? I go to the doctors and it's paid through workers' comp. We don't have the same thing when it comes to mental illness or mental
Right.
harm that has happened based upon us being at work. So for instance, if I go through my job and I get diagnosed with PTSD for all these other things that I've seen throughout my career, I don't get workers' comp to cover for the rest of, my career. Maybe that should be something that we should look at.
It most certainly is. It most certainly is. If society is ready to put us out there on the front line and we have to deal with come what may, then society has to be ready to back us up when come what may comes, and we're destroyed. They've got to be ready to back us up.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that's the answer. The basic answer is, look, we need to be taken care of. So unless they're willing to take care of us, how can they possibly ask us to go out and do the job that we're doing? If a police officer is shot on the job, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but quite often that is seen almost as a badge of honor. He was shot. A lot of people feel that poor guy was shot on the job. Like it gives them some kind of a, I don't know, I don't know what
Yeah,
proper
it
word is, but
elevates like a certain status. People see that as, oh, you must have been doing something really hard at that time, right?
exactly, exactly. It's seen as something. Wow, that's really. But if someone suffers PTSD, which is not that different from being shot. It's just like the physical and the mental aspect, but it's kind of equal to being shot. And why is it seen as being so negative and like, oh, you're weak, you're in the wrong job, you can't handle, what you're supposed to do? Why is it seen so differently? If someone commits suicide on the job, I know here, I don't know about in the States, but I know here, if we commit suicide on the job, you're seeing there's no big funeral, there's no civic, there's no flag waving, there's nothing. You're buried and people try to forget about you. But if you're killed in the line of duty while you're doing your job, oh my God, the whole city comes out and they celebrate you and they all take their hat off to you and you'll never be forgotten.
Hmm.
What's the difference? If a person is shot and killed on the job, it's because of the job. If a person suffers PTSD and kill themselves because of the job, it's the job. They're both the job.
Mm.
I don't see the big difference.
How can leadership, like the people who are in the upper echelon of the different departments, fire, medical, how can they encourage people to come forward to talk about these mental health issues, especially when it seems like there's like this, like we've talked about already, there's this pervasive stigma that we can't seem to get past.
Well, how about making these programs mandatory? So if you have an 80 hour, I mean a 40 hour work week, you start off by devoting 2 hours out of that 40 hour work week to mandatory therapy sessions or mandatory group sessions where everyone comes together and starts talking about this. And then once it's become something that's a regular thing, the higher ups in administration are the ones that need um, to get the funding from the government or from whoever it is that's funding them. So they need to get the funding so that we can strengthen these kind of things and then make them bigger. Instead of 2 hours, we stretch it into 3 hours and we just keep going. And then we make it sort of uh, after hours, after work, we can have we're going out, we're all going to be going out apple picking, or we're all going to go out and do this. Now it's kind of like becomes a social group, but you keep that element of everybody's got everybody's back sort of deal.
The truth is, there's a lot of people in different departments that are making things mandatory in certain ways. I can tell you, I spoke with Chief of Police Lance Arnold over at Weatherford Police Department here in Texas. His department does mandatory mental health check-ins every year for every employee, both sworn and civilian, to cover all
This is
aspects.
fantastic.
And there's other
Fantastic.
departments that kind of do the same. So, I agree with you. Yes, we do need to have that mandatory mental health check-in. And once it becomes kind of the norm of having that conversation, the stigma starts to go away. I mean, I think the stigma
Exactly.
has melted since, the 90s or even early 2000s. I think the stigma has melted a little bit just in the fact that we're able to have these conversations.
You hire somebody to do work uh, in your yard, you expect that they're going to come with the proper tools. They're going to take the right amount of time to do this. The job is going to be done properly. God forbid something goes wrong. Well, then that causes a bit of a problem, but it's the same idea. We're hired to do a certain job. If we don't have the right tools, and not just the physical tools, but the mental tools, if we don't have that, if we don't have that in our toolbox, how can we possibly do the job correctly? It's not
Yep.
going to be done properly. It's not going to be done to the satisfaction of the people that are hiring us to do the job. That's what they need to understand. Give us the tools and the resources that we need.
The things that you're doing right now with the recognize, react, recover, what is some of the things that you've seen how it's impacting the first responder community and how is that going towards your ultimate goal?
It is having a very positive impact on the first responder community. I'm getting a lot more people now that are contacting me, asking me about what the program is, instead of me having to look for people and reaching out. So just by word of mouth, I think the idea has gotten out to people, and they kind of like it because there's no walls, there's no parameters, there's no rules or regulations. It's come as you are. You can sit and listen, or you can sit and share. That's entirely up to you. And I think people are starting to feel emboldened in the fact that, hey, I just listened to this guy talk about something that's bothering him, and I went through the exact same thing. I'm not alone in this. A lot of people feel that they're an island, that they've suffered something and it's unique to them. Once they find out that other people have suffered this and gotten through it and actually grown beyond it, then there's light at the end of the tunnel. These people can see that, oh my God, I can get through this with the support of these people who know exactly what I'm dealing with. So to answer your question, yeah, we've made progress. We still have a long way to go, mind you, because again, like I said, it's a grassroots project. But I think with time and with the success rate that we're seeing, then perhaps we're gonna keep growing. And then hopefully I'll be able to hand this off to a bigger group, a bigger and a more responsible and professional group than just myself. But
Mhm.
if I can help one person along the way, then my job's been done.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here. And everybody, thank you for joining us today on the Blue Watch. Please share and subscribe for more leadership insights from the front line and check out our website, thebluewatch.com. And until next time, stay safe, everyone.